Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I'm so pleased to welcome you to the second week of our two-week series, a discussion of disability issues, and much of our discussion is evolved around the 1990 law, Americans with Disability Act. And we talked a lot about that last week. On this program, we will deal with some of the services that are provided, particularly here in Idaho, and also some of the humanistic questions and issues that come out of helping people who have these particular challenges. I first of all welcome to the program Michael Graham. He is the administrator of the Idaho Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Michael, welcome to the program. It's so nice to have you to come to Coeur d'Alene from Boise and be with us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And I'm equally pleased to have Sharon Daniels Bullock with us. She is the coordinator at North Idaho College's Center for Educational Access, and Sharon was with us last week. And Sharon, before our viewers, I want to thank you for helping us put together this two-week series. You were most helpful in that process.
I've enjoyed it.
And I'm so pleased to have our regular panelist, Erna Reinhardt, who's Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and she will commence today's questioning.
Welcome, Sharon, and welcome, Michael, to the show. It's great to have you here. I want to begin first with a discussion about what vocational rehabilitation is. And Michael, tell us who it is that your agency serves and what kind of services do you have available for them?
Well, you don't want me to go on and on for a long time, but let me see if I can be a little bit succinct. Anybody who has a disability that is such that it keeps them from integrating into society, in particular the job market, we can provide services to assist that individual to become engaged in employment, hopefully with a good livable wage so that they can live in the community just like anybody else. We've had a...
I'm sorry. Are there funds available for individuals? Are there funds that can help them through that process?
Yes, there are. In fact, we receive a significant portion of our funds from the federal government. Almost 80% of our funds come from the federal government, and most of the remaining is from the state. And we spend direct on individuals throughout the year something like $7 or $8 million in direct services. That might pay for college tuition, it might pay for adaptive equipment, it might pay for therapy, whatever service is necessary and appropriate for an individual to resolve issues regarding their disability and return to work.
And how about age? Are they when you say that they're individuals that you're working with to get back into the employment arena, can they be any age? Is there an age restriction at all?
There is some age restriction. We only work with individuals age 14 and above. So we have a lower limit, but we do not have an upper limit.
All righty.
Let me follow up on a little bit on that with you, Michael. I assume, and sometimes assuming is not the best way to go about it, but it's a way to ask my question. I assume that every one of the states in America have some division such as the one in Idaho. Would that be correct? That they would work with individuals as you do in vocational rehabilitation programs?
All 50 states do, and so do the territories.
And so, since our audience is a broad audience in more than one state, if we have viewers from other states and they have an interest in this process, they can work with their state. I assume all of those are operated through state government, as yours is. There might be a different mix in funding and those kind of things, but they could, through their state, find out this service.
Yes, it's quite similar in each of the states because we're under the same federal regulations. And if anybody from another state wanted to contact their office nearest them but didn't know quite how, if they contacted us, we would direct them.
Let's take this moment, because a whole idea of our program is to serve our public, and let's take a moment, and our staff, again, I praise them because they're so conscientious on all this. Shall we share with them, I believe you have a website and also maybe a phone number. Yeah, the website and the phone number have come up. Would you share that also for those that might be in another room and listening but not seeing the screen?
The website we have is, you can be connected through the Idaho homepage, or it's www.idvr.state.id.us, and I know that's long, But there is a website, and we can be reached once someone gets to our homepage. There's contact information for each of the offices around the state. For example, since we're in Coeur d'Alene right now, there's a regional office in Coeur d'Alene, and there is also one in all of the major cities of the state, as well as a number of satellite offices. In Idaho, we have about 35 offices, and in other states it's similar. There's offices throughout other states.
And I'm also correct, I'm sure that every state in our country, and the territories too, have websites. And so if you're living in Oregon or Montana, Washington, wherever, they could go to their state's website, and it would direct them through the index to the same kind of services. Michael, would you talk a little bit more? Then I want to ask Sharon some questions. But you've indicated before the program that you're under the supervision of the State Board of Education in Idaho, and that you do provide services to particular two areas that you identified before the program. One is mental health services, and others in the schools. Would you share a little bit more about those programs?
Yes, in reality, any kind of disability we'll provide services for. The only possible exception to that is with someone who has a severe visual impairment or blindness. They might go directly to the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which is also accessible to the Idaho homepage. In terms of mental health or school to work, we have counselors located in school districts, and individuals who might be age 16, 17, something like that, a junior or senior in high school, will get connected to our rehabilitation counselors, and that counselor will work with the individual until they finish a rehabilitation process and are in the job market. That means that they might not stay with them just to the end of high school graduation, but much longer in many cases. Mental health works the same way. We have counselors located in mental health centers around the state, and it's through a cooperative agreement with health and welfare or with the school districts. They help us with some of the funding. We provide services directly to their consumers, and it's a win-win for us as well as for them.
You also indicated before the program is an advantage, because we do a lot of talking before we do the show, that you're looking at a new venture, and that is that in the prisons, some individuals are in prison for short periods of time or a few years, and there is certain rehabilitation programs. They're going to come back into society. What are your plans in relation to this new venture that you are in the working stage now?
I'll give you a short but interesting part of the background. We have not always recognized that a high percentage of those who are incarcerated also have disabilities. In some cases they're physical, in some cases they're mental, and that is one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why they may be incarcerated. Nearly 20% of our caseload across the state right now are ex-offenders, and we have been working with the Department of Corrections to develop a partnership to more effectively provide services to the population who has been incarcerated for whatever reason, if they also have a disability that prevents them from either holding work or obtaining employment. We intend to have the same kind of an agreement that we have with the school districts and with mental health, so that we'll have a counselor on the inside of the prison system. And we're working with the Department of Corrections now, ironing out those details. We haven't started that program, so that it's not fully operational yet. But it will allow us to work with those that are incarcerated with disabilities, so that there isn't a significant time lapse after release before they can receive services from our agency, so that the transition is much more seamless in order to decrease the likelihood of reincarceration.
Thank you so very much. Sharon, you and I have worked together a lot, and I've had a lot of good conversations with you. And one thing I said to you before the program, and that's where I really want to focus for a few minutes, and this is not a criticism of our discussing laws, that's very important, and their provisions and why they come about, but sometimes in doing that we fail to look at the end result of the humanistic questions involved. Would you be so kind as to share with us some examples, without obviously invading privacy, of why some individuals' life has become so much better in the experience you've had with them because these avenues are available and these policies are in place?
Well, there are so many. I've had so many experiences, and it is a part of my job that is incredibly rewarding to see these individuals be able to be successful in spite of a disability. A particular student that I can think of is a student who was supported by vocational rehab when he came to North Idaho College, and had tried at North Idaho College actually earlier, but because the law was not yet enacted, he did not receive accommodations. So after he heard about this rumor, okay, we're going to do something different now, he came back, and he did enlist the help of a vocational rehab counselor. And I remember them coming to my office and us having a meeting, and he was very nervous and skeptical because of what had happened to him before. This was a student with a learning disability. In fact, he talked about his issues all the way back to the first grade when the whole thing started becoming very stressful for him, being the kid that didn't know how to read and didn't know how to write, and always feeling like he was very stupid. But eventually he started taking classes, and we started accommodating him by allowing him to have the papers that he wrote proofed prior to turning them in, because he just could not see errors on the pages. But if they were pointed out to him, of course, then he was responsible to make his own corrections. Just that one step that was different really made a difference, and he worked very hard at those papers, and in the end was very proud of having been able to do that, as were his English instructors. Because over a period of time, he of course did learn more of the skills, because usually what happens with kids is they will become so frustrated, they will back off and they won't stick with it. But with the encouragement and the little help that he got, he did stay with it more. Well, to make a long story short, he completed NIC, he graduated from NIC, he went into graduate school, came to see me just a couple of months ago. He actually transferred over to EWU. He received an award from EWU for high achievement.
Eastern Washington University.
Yes, Eastern Washington University, and then he went into a graduate program at Eastern Washington University, and since then has been, and I'm going to probably get this wrong, but he's been recruited by the military in some forensic capacity, which he was very encouraged and excited about, never having thought he could have ever been successful. Wonderful, wonderful story.
Without those programs, he would not be where he is today.
He wouldn't. I know that he wouldn't, because he had tried it before, and it was so frustrating to him that he had to quit, and he wouldn't have come back if he hadn't learned that or heard that. Do you want more? I have so many stories.
I would like to have one more. Before you get it, let me give you a support here. One of my students in political science was certified with your office, and she was a delightful person, and she only needed to use a couple of your services, but they were very essential. And some of the students take tests in a quiet environment, wherever, and she chose not to do so, take it in the classroom, but she had these other assistants. And my classes are known for being quite rigid, and rigorous is a better word. Rigorous, and she made the highest grade all through the semester. What a wonderful story, and also what a wonderful self-esteem building program. But go ahead, give us one more.
Yes. Well, I have another student that I think of that he came from the other side of the state, Washington, I should say, and eventually came over to Idaho. He is another student, actually, that had a learning disability. The majority of our students who have disabilities on campus are students with learning disabilities. And so he gave a very similar story to the other student. He had a lot of difficulty reading, a lot of difficulty writing, to the point that he felt like he would never, ever be in college. Just never even visualized that for himself. Wonderful basketball player, though. Really, really, really good. But got in an accident, and guess what? Basketball went away. So he then came back and tried college again, and this time requested accommodations. And this young man, the tenacity was unbelievable to me, because he was also an overachiever, so everything had to be perfect. This student really, really worked. And the students that have learning disabilities they really work. I have so much respect for the students connected to my office. Their perseverance is unbelievable. They want this degree. They are going to get this degree. Anyway, he did that. He transferred actually to the University of Montana, and went over there with scholarships, lots of scholarships, a lot of effort put into getting those, and he got them. And he had come back to say, and wrote a letter to me saying, the accommodations that I have been afforded have changed my life. A wonderful story, wonderful success story again.
Then those students go on in their career to help other students. It's the domino effect, where it goes on through generations. Erna Reinhardt.
Those are great. Thank you for sharing those. Those are wonderful. Michael, I want to ask you a little bit about, if you could share with us the process that people go through in terms of when they contact your office for help. How does that process work? And I'm wondering, do you work one-on-one with individuals? Do you help them do some career exploration? How do you determine the training that's going to fit with what they want to do, and how does that all fall into place? Maybe from the initial contact that they make with you, and then how do you follow up with those individuals? Just give us a little overview of how that works.
Okay, I want to mention first too, on the personal side, I'm an individual who, because of Oak Rehab, that's part of the reason why I'm where I am today.
Awesome.
I received services once upon a time, and the system, how it works, isn't so different today as it was when I was a consumer of vocational rehabilitation, even though that was in another state. What we do is, in some cases, there's a reference made, a referral to our agency. It could be from a doctor, it could be from a family friend, it could be from health and welfare, some social service. It could be from a variety of places, maybe word of mouth. The first thing that we establish is the individual eligible for our services. We have to have documentation that an individual has a disability, either mental or physical, and that disability in some manner keeps the individual from being employed. Once that eligibility is determined, and that's between the documentation and the time spent with the consumer, with one of our counselors. We have about 70 counselors around the state, and they're trained at the master's degree level in rehabilitation counseling. So we have a highly skilled professional staff that work one-on-one with the consumers as they come into our offices, or we may meet them outside of the office as well at times. Once the eligibility is determined, then a plan is developed, and it's a plan which is like an agreement between the individual receiving the services and our agency. We agree we're going to do A, B, and C. They agree they're going to do D, E, and F. Mm-hmm. And once we've reached that agreement might be school, it might be some specific training like a beautician, it might be training for truck driving, whatever is appropriate in accordance with that particular disability, so that we increase the likelihood of success. Once we have the plan in place, we provide the service, the consumer does their part. Once that's all done, we provide services in terms of assistance to locate employment. In many cases, the consumer at that point is able to obtain their own employment. Otherwise, we assist in that process. Once they're on the job, we stay with them for the next 3 months to make sure that there's stability before a case is closed. And once we've provided services, in some cases in the future, it might be several years, it could be months, there's additional services needed, and we would be re-engaged with the consumer at that point if necessary. Over the last 10 years, we've had success stories of between 14 and 15,000, and every one of those, this is in the state of Idaho, every one of those has their own personal story of success in terms of the work that we've had the opportunity to be engaged with them.
Awesome. I was just going to ask you how many people that you see in a typical year, so that's perfect. Thank you.
I want to put this on a national scale, and I hope this is a reasonable question. I hesitate to ask a question about statistics, I'm not telling you in advance, and Michael, you referred to it just now in relation to Idaho, and again, without, having to pin it down to the exact numbers, but what kind of population, general numbers, are we talking about across America that are served in all of these areas that we're talking about, whether it be in education or it be in the workplace or wherever it may be? This is a significant population across America, is it not?
It is a very significant population. We can look at it this way. Now, the figure I mentioned of between 14 and 15,000, That's a 10-year period for Idaho.
Okay.
Last year we did 1,799 successful rehabilitations. Now across the nation, that figure is a little over 200, about 210,000, and it ranges between there and 230,000 per year that are successful. And in any given year, about 15% of those that we provide service to are successfully rehabilitated. Before you would jump to a conclusion, well, that's not very good, 15%. The issue is that we provide services for many individuals for quite a few years. For example, if somebody gets on our caseload when they're a junior in high school and we stay with them until they've completed a bachelor's degree, you can see that that's quite a few years. So about 15% per year are closed successful, and the total number that's closed successful is very high, as 70-some% or 80%. I'm not sure of the exact figure. And we know that in Idaho, for every one that is closed successful, 78% of them have a job 1 year later, the same job.
As Sharon shared with us so eloquently, it's such a humane thing to do, and those individual stories are so very important. Secondly, I'd point out and get your reaction to it is that when you have that kind of success rate over time, that has to impact, first of all, the lives of those individuals and their families, but also impacts the entire country economically and in achieving advancements in different fields, like you're talking about in the military or with medicine, whatever it is. So, Sharon, let's start with you and say, again, as someone who has access to other people in this field, there must be some discussion of the impact it has on this country in a most significant and important way.
Well, I know that in terms of employment, there has been a prevailing stereotype out there that disabled people use state aid for funds rather than working, and it's because of something inherent in them or whatever. Research was done, and what was found is that individuals with disabilities want to work, they want to be productive, they want to be a part of society. The problems, though, were because there were so many barriers in employment and education that needed to be changed in order to allow them to get through the training they needed in order to become gainfully employed and productive citizens of our society. And that not only affects us as a society in terms of their being able to support themselves, but also in terms of how they see themselves as individuals, and then how that affects their children and the next generation. Because to be put in a position where you cannot be independently, gainfully employed and take care of yourself and be productive and take care of your family, then it changes how you see yourself, how you see your world, and what your children learn from you. So it profoundly affects us as a community.
As we've addressed this issue over the latter part of the 20th century and into our 21st century, has it not done something else too? And I'll get again Sharon to respond to this. Haven't we as a society learned a lot more about certification and testing and all things that we did not know? I know in the field of reading and writing, for example, that some of the things that the diagnostic advancements, that's also been important, isn't it? I mean, there's things that we can do in testing and assisting that we some years ago didn't even know how to do.
Oh, yes. I think that is absolutely true. Though I'm wondering, are you focusing on achievement testing, or are we focused on the kind of testing that needs to take place in order to help individuals understand?
The tests that have to be done to help the individuals, not the achievement test so much. In other words, I'm thinking particular with a disability that has to do with reading and writing, that we have some new terms for that. I'm just saying that we've advanced in those areas so we know how to help the individual.
Yes, so much. In fact, in terms of neuropsychology and in terms of that kind of testing and actually understanding learning disabilities is also fairly new. I'd say in the last 10 or 15 years, neuropsychologists have been able to begin to identify what So what is going on? I mean, and still, I mean, the brain is a very complicated organ.
Yes.
It's very difficult to tell.
And we use a small percentage of it, I understand, of its totality. I hear
Very
10
small
to 15%.
percentage, yes.
Yeah.
But significantly for students with learning disabilities, and I'd say it again because they are the most significant across the country in terms of the disabilities that are at least are evident in college, that it is important to understand that neuropsychologists and psychology has determined that these are neurological defects. It's not a matter of teaching a kid out of it, or they didn't pay attention enough, or they didn't try hard enough, or they didn't read it long enough. But rather that there is something going on neurological for these individuals. It's actually that it's genetic. It's something that kids can inherit. And that we need to deal with it a different way in order that they can still achieve the same goals.
We just found the same thing in manic depressive. There's a chemical imbalance, and that's something that's not the fault of the person.
You're right.
Michael, I would like to get you to respond to this too. And do you also hear from the people you work with that the fact that we're given this emphasis, it also encourages scientists and others to do more research to be assistants in this process?
You know, outside of what we do, medicine and technology are phenomenal in how they can remove disabilities through the intervention strategies. Once we know that medicine or technology is at its limits, then that's where we can make a huge difference in terms of services, whether that be assessment or the services that we provide. And the issues are complex. They're a struggle. And one of the reasons that they're complex and a struggle is because there's nobody leading the way ahead of us. The U.S. is clearly out in front of the rest of the world in terms of what we're doing in rehabilitation, education. There's many other countries that are working at it, and many are looking to us and what we have done. It's something where I believe this country can be quite proud of what it's done in conjunction with those who have disabilities.
I was talking to Vice President's Institution this morning, this is by coincidence for this program, and he'd visited another country in Europe recently and said he was appalled at and surprised with the lack of assistance, like sidewalks, where there's no elevated sidewalks for a wheelchair. It's just this abrupt edge. And so, Michael, it's interesting to hear you say that, and it's very encouraging that the United States is leading the way, and I'm sure that because we've been commendable in this area and to be, I think, honored for our work in this area, that we can also assist beyond our boundaries. On that note, Michael Graham and Sharon Daniels Bullock, I want to thank both of you, and I know that Erna Reinhardt joins me in this. It's been really 2 good weeks, and I'm just so thankful that we've been able to share with our viewers why these programs are needed and why they've succeeded. And I think what's come out of this program that's most important to me is it is the humane and the right thing to do, and it's also economically the smart thing to do in the process. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll be with us again next week when on this program we'll turn to yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.